Welcome back to another video, friends. Tonight's story takes us deep into the untamed frontier, where hunger, hardship, and loneliness walk hand in hand with danger. Imagine a little orphan girl, frail and forgotten by the world, barely surviving on scraps. Now picture her making a choice that no one expected, helping a wounded native girl limp across a raging river. She had no family, no friends, and nothing to her name, yet she gave the little she had to save a stranger. But what she didn't know was that by dawn, 30 Apache warriors would arrive at her door. And what they came to do would shake her life forever. The river roared like an angry beast swollen by spring rains. Its muddy current tore at the roots of trees and carried away branches like toothpicks. On its banks, barefoot and shivering in a ragged dress, stood a little girl named Eliza. She was no more than 10 years old, with tangled hair the color of chestnuts and eyes too old for her years. Orphaned by fever that had swept through her small frontier town, she now survived on whatever she could scavenge. A crust of bread here, a handful of berries there. Her home was an abandoned shack near the edge of the woods, a place no settler wanted, and no one cared to claim. That evening, with her stomach aching from hunger, Eliza had wandered to the river hoping to catch fish with a sharpened stick. She was concentrating so hard on the rippling water that she almost didn't notice the figure on the far bank. It was a girl, not much older than herself, maybe 12 or 13 at most. Her long black hair clung wet to her shoulders, her simple buckskin dress torn at the hem, and she was limping badly, her face twisted with pain as she struggled to keep her balance. For a moment, Eliza froze. She knew instantly this was no settler child. This was an Apache girl. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had heard the stories whispered by frightened townsfolk. Raids, arrows, fire. Savages, they called them. But what she saw across the river was not a savage. It was a child, hurt, scared, and alone. The Apache girl tried to step into the river but faltered, nearly swept away by the current. She cried out softly, clutching her ankle. Eliza bit her lip. She had no reason to help. No one would blame her if she turned and walked away. But something inside her, something stronger than fear, urged her forward. "Wait," Eliza shouted, her thin voice almost lost in the roar of water. She clutched the stick in her hand tighter, more for courage than defense. "Don't move, I'll help you." She scrambled downstream, searching for a fallen log that spanned the torrent. At last she found one wedged between rocks. Balancing carefully, she crossed halfway, the river snarling beneath her. The Apache girl watched with wide, wary eyes, as if unsure whether to trust this stranger. Eliza held out her hand. "Come on, I won't let you fall." For a moment, the native girl hesitated. Then, trembling, she limped forward and grasped Eliza's small hand. Together, inch by inch, they crossed the log, the spray of the river soaking their dresses. When at last they reached the near bank, both girls collapsed in the grass, breathless and shaking. Eliza glanced at the girl's ankle, swollen and bruised purple. Without thinking, she tore a strip from her own dress and bound it as best she could. The girl flinched at first, then gave a faint nod of thanks. She whispered something in Apache. Eliza didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Gratitude. As the sun dipped low, Eliza helped her limp back to the shack. She gave the girl the last crust of bread she had hidden beneath a tin plate. Her own stomach growled in protest, but she ignored it. That night, the two of them huddled together on the straw pallet. Eliza listened to the girl's uneven breathing until sleep claimed them both. She had no idea that her small act of kindness, her simple choice to share what little she had already changed her fate. And when dawn broke over the horizon, the thunder of hooves would reveal just how much. The first rays of dawn slipped through the cracks of the shack, painting thin golden lines across the dusty floor. Eliza stirred awake to the sound of soft breathing beside her. For a moment she forgot the night before, until she saw the Apache girl still asleep, her injured ankle bound with Eliza's torn cloth. Then she heard it. Thunder. Not from the sky, but from the earth itself. She sat up, her heart racing. The rumble grew louder, closer, until the wooden walls trembled. Dust drifted from the rafters. Eliza scrambled to the door and pushed it open, her bare feet crunching on the dry ground outside. Her breath caught in her throat. across the rise. Descending like a wave of shadows against the rising sun came horsemen. Dozens of them, feathers in their hair, bows slung across their backs, spears glinting in the light. 30 Apache warriors rode in silence, their eyes fixed on the little shack at the river's edge. Eliza's knees turned weak. She wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Behind her, the wounded girl stirred and called out weakly in her own tongue. At the sound of her voice, the riders broke into a faster trot. Within moments, they surrounded the shack, a ring of horses snorting and pawing at the earth. Eliza clutched the doorframe, her small hands white-knuckled. She had heard the settlers' tales of what happened when warriors found trespassers on their land. But instead of anger, she saw something else in their eyes as they dismounted. Concern, urgency. The leader stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, his braids streaked with gray. His gaze fell first on Eliza, then on the girl limping toward him with Eliza's arm around her waist. The girl spoke quickly in Apache, pointing at Eliza, at the river, at her bandaged ankle. The warriors listened in silence. Then one by one they lowered their weapons. The leader's hard expression softened. He looked down at Eliza, this thin, barefoot orphan child, and for the first time he spoke in halting English. "You saved my daughter." Eliza blinked, stunned. She glanced at the wounded girl, who gave the faintest of nods. The gray-haired warrior dropped to one knee before Eliza, pressing a hand to his chest. The others followed, murmuring words she couldn't understand. Eliza's heart pounded as she realized the truth. She had not just helped a stranger. She had saved the daughter of an Apache chief. And now 30 warriors had come, not for revenge, but for something she could never have imagined. The air was thick with silence as the Apache chief rose to his feet. He gave a sharp command and the warriors parted, leaving an opening. With a gesture, he beckoned for Eliza to follow. Eliza's heart pounded so loud she thought they might hear it. She looked back at the shack, her only shelter, broken and small, yet the only place she had called home since losing her parents. Now 30 warriors stood waiting, their gazes unreadable, their chief's eyes burning with authority. The wounded girl, his daughter, squeezed Eliza's hand. Though her words were foreign, the message was clear: come with us. And so, barefoot and trembling, Eliza stepped out from the doorway and into their circle. They placed the chief's daughter gently onto a horse, helping her mount despite her limp. Then, to Eliza's surprise, one warrior extended his hand to her. She hesitated only a moment before climbing up behind him. The horse lurched forward, and in a rush of pounding hooves they rode into the wilderness. The journey was long. The sun climbed high and beat down on them, and Eliza's arms clung desperately to the warrior's waist to avoid falling. She caught glimpses of the land around her, rolling hills, jagged mesas, stretches of desert, where even the wind seemed to whisper secrets. By the time the sun dipped low again, smoke rose in the distance. They entered a wide valley, and there it was, an Apache camp. Dozens of lodges made of hide and wood stood in neat circles. Children ran barefoot between them, women tended fires, and hunters returned with game slung over their shoulders. The warriors dismounted, and the camp erupted into noise, people rushing forward, relief flooding their faces as they saw the chief's daughter alive. Yana, that was her name, Eliza learned later, was carried gently into one of the larger lodges. Eliza stood awkwardly, clutching her arms across her chest, feeling small and out of place. Whispers rippled through the camp. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. She was an outsider, a settler child. The settlers were their enemies. What was she doing here in the very heart of Apache life? The chief silenced them with a single raised hand. He stepped toward Eliza, studying her in the firelight. Then in his broken English he said, "You give life to my blood. For this you are under my protection." The crowd murmured again, softer this time. Eliza lowered her eyes, unsure what to do. She had never been protected by anyone since her parents' death. She had never belonged anywhere. And now somehow, she stood in the center of a people she had been taught to fear, yet she felt no fear now. The days that followed changed her more than she ever expected. The women of the camp gave her food, thick stew from a clay pot, bread baked on stones more than she had eaten in weeks. She helped grind maize, fetch water from the stream, gather firewood. Children her age, at first hesitant, began to approach her. They laughed as she stumbled over Apache words, but soon they were teaching her games and songs. And Ayanna, though still limping, stayed close by her side. At night, as the fire crackled and the drums beat softly in the distance, Ayanna would teach her words, pointing to the stars, the river, the fire, whispering the Apache names until Eliza repeated them clumsily. For the first time since losing everything, Eliza felt warmth inside her chest. Not just from food or fire, but from longing, yet not everyone welcomed her. Some warriors muttered in anger, calling her a settler spy. Others warned the chief that keeping a white child in their camp would bring trouble, and they were right. Trouble was coming, because even as Eliza found a place among the Apache far across the frontier, whispers had begun. Settlers had seen Apache warriors near the river, and when they discovered a little orphan girl was missing, the blame fell fast and heavy. A storm was gathering, one that would soon test Eliza's loyalty, her courage, and the bond she had formed with the very people her own kind called enemies. The Apache camp was alive with drums that night, their rhythms echoing through the valley. Flames flickered high, shadows danced on the lodge walls, and Eliza sat beside Ayanna, her heart both full and uneasy. She had found safety, food, and something close to family here. Yet in the back of her mind, she knew it could not last. At dawn, the sound of a horn split the silence. Not an Apache horn, this one was harsh, foreign, unmistakable. The sound of settlers. Eliza rushed outside, her stomach twisting. From the ridge beyond the valley, a line of riders appeared. Armed settlers, rifles glinting in the morning light. And at their head was Mr. Granger, the cruel rancher who had once turned her away when she begged for bread. There she is, he bellowed, pointing his gun toward Eliza. The little thief! She's with them savages! The settlers fanned out, forming a line of firepower. Mothers clutched their children close. Warriors reached for their bows, and tension crackled like lightning between storm clouds. The Apache chief strode forward, tall and unyielding. He raised his staff, signaling his warriors. In seconds, 30 men on horseback formed a wall between the settlers and their camp. The sight was thunderous, faces painted, lances glinting, their horses stomping with fury. And then came the unthinkable. Instead of charging forward with war cries, the 30 warriors dismounted. They placed their weapons on the ground. One by one they stood tall, their chests bare, their hands raised not in surrender but in defiance. It was a silent message. If you want to take the child, you will have to kill us all unarmed. The settlers shifted nervously. Guns trembled in their hands. They had expected a fight, blood, an easy excuse to wipe out the Apache. But this act of fearless unity shook them, Granger sneered, trying to steady his men. They're bluffing, he growled. Yet not a single warrior moved. Eliza's voice broke the silence, small, trembling, but loud enough for both sides to hear. They saved me, she cried, stepping out from behind Ayanna. They fed me when none of you would. They kept me alive. They are not your enemies, they are my family. The words hung in the air. The settlers stared at her, a ragged little orphan girl standing shoulder to shoulder with warriors they had feared all their lives. Something cracked in the tension. A few settlers lowered their rifles. Granger cursed and spat, but even he knew. 30 men ready to die without weapons were stronger than 30 rifles loaded with bullets. Finally, with a frustrated yell, Granger turned his horse. Fine, keep the cursed brat. But don't come crawling back when they turn on you. The settlers retreated, their line breaking apart. Hooves thundered back toward the horizon, leaving dust in their wake. When they were gone, the camp erupted, not in cheers, but in silence heavy with relief. The 30 warriors picked up their weapons again, standing proud. Ayanna wrapped her arm around Eliza, pulling her close. That morning, as the sun broke over the valley, Eliza knew her life had changed forever. She was no longer the orphan no one wanted. She was the girl 30 warriors had stood unarmed to protect. And from that day on, she wasn't just a lost child. She was one of them.